Residents' rights, abuse and neglect.
Tonight, 2 Minnesota teenagers are accused of physically and sexually assaulting patients in a nursing home, just for laughs.
A warning, some of the details of this story are hard to believe and may be difficult to hear. Brianna Breutzman and Ashton Larson worked as nursing assistants at the Good Samaritan Society in Albert Lea. As Liz Collins shares, prosecutors say the girls got away with the abuse for months, even though other teenagers knew about it.
Accusations say they spit in their mouths, spanked them, and poked them in the breasts. Just a few of the things prosecutors say these part-time nursing assistants did to 15 nursing home residents for at least 5 months for fun.
It's been very difficult for our staff, for our current residents, for our families. It's been a challenge for the community.
The sordid stories first came to light in May after a group of girls who were students at Albert Lea High School and worked at the Good Samaritan Society finally fessed up. Documents say Breutzman and Larson bragged to them about arousing male residents with Alzheimer's and dementia and sticking their fingers in their rectums. It took 7 months for charges to be filed.
We are just really thankful that the proceedings we're moving forward, and we can hopefully see some closure to this whole process.
Very disappointed, very upset about the whole situation.
Sue Johnson's mother is a resident here and admits it was a difficult decision to make after hearing the abuse allegations.
At that moment that we needed to bring her to a nursing home, we had no choice. So they assured me when we brought her in that it was a much better, they were really watching everything now.
The state says the nursing home did nothing wrong, and documents say the girls were confident they would not get caught because the residents did not have their minds. If they are convicted of these misdemeanor charges, they could spend several years in jail and pay thousands of dollars in fines. 4 other girls were also charged today with keeping their mouths shut while all this apparently was going on, Amelia. All of the girls, we should say, have been fired.
Such a disturbing story.
A loved one in a nursing home, you know how important and difficult the decision to place them there can be.
After awful abuse allegations this week against 2 Minnesota teenagers in Albert Lea, it may make you rethink your choice. And in the last 3 years, the Minnesota Department of Health investigated complaints at 333 nursing homes. That is more than 3/4 of the facilities in the entire state. Some nursing homes have several complaints. Some are unfounded. To look at each one yourself, just go to our website and you can search by name or city at WCCO.com.
Last couple of weeks, we've had to share some pretty disturbing stories about elderly Minnesotans being abused in nursing homes.
When we have to make the tough decision to put mom or dad in a nursing home, we want to know they're comfortable. That's why dozens of people turned out tonight at a meeting in Albert Lea. Liz Collins shares some tips they learned to give families peace of mind.
We believe with all of our hearts that somebody's going to take care of them in a manner in which we can't, and that trust has been betrayed in the worst possible way.
After spending months in silence, Jan Reshetar told her story in front of the cameras and bright lights for one reason.
This is a situation that can never be allowed to happen again.
Reshetar's mother-in-law is one of more than a dozen patients who documents say were physically and sexually abused at the Good Samaritan Society for months by teenage girls looking for laughs.
We see so many of these allegations across the nation. Albert Lea does not have a monopoly on this.
For nearly 9 years, Wes Bledsoe has been working to end nursing home abuse after his own loss.
I received a phone call from my brother saying Granny's at the hospital, the nurse home's killed her.
Tonight he was here pushing people to look beyond what you see once you walk in.
Some of these facilities, once you get past that facade, is something totally, and in many cases, terribly different.
And Liz, I know that you learned some helpful tips for families who have to put their loved ones in a nursing home.
Yeah, Amelia, this really is a big decision. There's a lot of homework that people should do before they make it. First of all, talk to families who have a relative in that nursing home and look for facilities that have regular meetings for families. Also, take your time through a tour and ask a lot of questions. That's the time to do it. Another tip, check out a facility's record through state records and set up links to Bledsoe's. Or I should say, too, this case in Albert Lea is far from over. In fact, Bledsoe will be there tomorrow pushing the county attorney for those felony charges.
I'm sure you'll be following that for us.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Liz.
Okay, how terrible is that? Our goals here today are to explain what abuse and neglect laws are, describe a vulnerable adult, discuss what actions constitute abuse and neglect, and tell how we report abuse and neglect. The Vulnerable Adult Act was enacted in 1980, and it was to protect populations easily victimized, like the elderly people here. Amendments to the Vulnerable Adult Act happened in 1995, and how it affects you is you had to have a background check to work at the nursing home. Facilities required to be licensed are affected by this, as I said. The nursing home, hospitals, resident or non-residential facilities, home care providers. The goal of the Vulnerable Adult Law is to protect adults who are vulnerable to maltreatment, provide safe living environments for adults who have been maltreated, and assist persons caring for vulnerable adults to provide safe environments and define who does not qualify as a vulnerable adult. A resident or representative will give information on admission at Divine Providence about our abuse prevention policies and the right to complain about and how to complain about abuse, neglect, or misappropriation of property. And explain not to fear punishment for complaining. On our new hires, we have a state background check done on all persons offered employment here, and an unfavorable outcome to that would result in termination of your employment. We train employees. We're doing that right now, initially in your orientation and the annual in-service. And you're being trained about the policies of abuse and neglect reporting. We are reviewed annually. There's an independent study materials reviewing abuse and neglect that I have to offer, and there's retraining as necessary. Prevention of abuse policies and procedures. Residents having a history of abuse, we try to have interventions put in place for that type of person to prevent future occurrences. We monitor them for changes. We reassess them at their care conferences. Abuse could occur in remote areas of the facility. Residents are encouraged not to go to these areas alone. The Marion Conference Room, physical therapy, Lake Villa Maria, snack shop, and the lobby. We try to prevent abuse by having adequate staff provided on all shifts. Supervisory staff will correct any unacceptable employee behavior, any kind of derogatory language used towards residents, ignoring other residents, any type of inappropriate behavior, and employees who do not respond to correction will be let go. Any employee receiving a report of witness or suspected abuse, neglect, or misappropriations of property must report this immediately to the administrator and county and state. Report immediately. Keep the report confidential. The administrator and the DON and the supervisor are people you can report to. But if you're not comfortable reporting to them, you can report to the State Office of Health Facility Complaints, and the number's right here and down the list. Brown County Family Services, State Ombudsman, Minnesota Department of Health. These numbers are in your employee handbook. What must be reported? Any type of abuse, verbal, neglect, physical, mental, injury of unknown source, and stealing residents' property. If we have an injury that is of an unknown source, we must report that. It should be reported to the nurse, documented in the chart. They need to plan care for it, review notes if this pattern exists. Could it be some sort of abuse? Report it to the administrator immediately if any suspicion of maltreatment, and immediately report to the Office of Health Facility Complaints and the county. The charge nurse is going to examine the patient and record the findings. The DON will do all the paperwork for that. Nurses and social service will complete resident abuse reporting, and the staff will monitor residents' condition following the incident. If you are charged with abuse and neglect, the administrator for that program will appoint a representative to investigate the incident. The accused individuals not employed at the facility have supervised visits to designated areas. The employee may be put on unpaid leave of absence, denied access to the victim, obviously, under direct supervision of assigned staff while investigation is being conducted. The result of the representative's investigation will be filed with the DON, accident incident report, and recorded in the investigation report. And the DON administrator will inform any investigative results to the resident and the representative, as well as the state. Employees found Guilty will be terminated. Not guilty, the employee's manager will determine actions needed for the employee to resume normal duties. People mandated to report abuse and neglect. Licensed health and human services professional, that's all of us. Personal care attendants and employees of licensed facility, which be everybody that's employed by Divine Providence. What other people can report? Everyone else, neighbors, family, concerned persons having contact with a person. Who is a vulnerable adult? Any person 18 years of age or older, a resident or inpatient of a facility, receives services from a licensed agency, receives services from the facility that is regulated by the MDH or the DHS, or a person receiving home care services from MDH or PCA. Who is a vulnerable adult? It can be a functional problem. Someone who's 18 years or age of older, regardless of residence or service, has an impairment or disability, and because of that impairment has impaired ability to meet basic needs for themselves, cooking, cleaning, and an impaired ability to protect self from maltreatment. Failure to provide, what is neglect? Failure to provide for a basic need may cause harm physically or mentally, such as food, shelter, health care, supervision, neglected by their caregiver, or self-neglect. What is an abuse definition? An act against a vulnerable adult, willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or punishment resulting in physical harm, pain, sexual misconduct, mental anguish, and deprivation of care. Verbal abuse would be oral, written, gestured language, derogatory terms, regardless of the resident's ability to understand. Sexual abuse would be some sort of sexual harassment, sexual coercion, sexual assault. At the beginning of this talk, I showed you the thing on WCCO about the abuse. Physical abuse would be hitting, slapping, pinching, kicking. Mental abuse, humiliating somebody, intimidating them, teasing them, calling them names, harassing them, demeaning them, threats of punishment, and withholding treatment or services. Involuntary seclusion abuse, separating a resident from others against their will, separating them from their room, again, against their will, and confinement to their room against their will. Emergency separations are permissible. If someone is running around and hitting and spitting and that, obviously you can separate them from the other people so they won't be harmed until you can get a doctor's order. Misappropriation of residents' property. Deliberate would be misplacement, exploitation, wrongful, temporary, or permanent use of residents' belongings or money without the resident's consent. That would be deliberate. Our goal here is to be free from abuse and neglect by everyone here, our residents, visitors, and staff.